From his first days of power, Hitler knew that he had to bring the children of Germany under his control. The future of the Third Reich rested on their shoulders. Hitler wanted to produce a generation of dedicated and ruthless Nazis. A generation who could realize his dream of conquering the world.
Wir wollen nicht der Letzte sein in diesem Konzert der Welt, sondern wir wollen mit die Ersten sein. Das ist unser Gelöbnis. Und dass dieser Wunsch in Erfüllung geht, seid ihr mir verantwortlich, denn in euch liegt die Zukunft der Nation und des Deutschen Reichs.
The new Germany was to be forged in an organization where boys and girls would learn to dedicate their lives to Hitler. This movement was the Hitler Youth. The Hitler Youth would expand until it controlled every aspect of German children's lives.
We suddenly felt different from before. We were important and had a mission.
We were like soldiers. We were actually sworn in. Even though we were only 14, we swore to give our lives for the Führer, the people, and the fatherland.
German schools quickly fell under Nazi control. In Hitler's classrooms, children learned the art of war. Even in the kindergarten, they were taught racial theory. Graphic picture books branded the Jews a dirty and poisonous race. SS doctors measured and graded children to weed out the undesirables.
Georg Weber, Augenfarbe 2a.
There's a saying, every little drop wears away a stone. And we were like stones that water dripped onto slowly until we believed it was true and everything was okay.
In the Third Reich, everyone had their function. For girls, it was to bear children. Special classes would mold perfect Nazi mothers. Boys were sent to Hitler Youth boot camps, where they were taught to fight and prepared for war. They would be a new breed of German man. The Hitler Youth movement charmed Germany's children and seduced them to its cause. By the time Hitler took the nation to war, millions had joined its ranks. They learned total devotion to Hitler and would ultimately be asked to sacrifice everything for their master. This is the story of Hitler's children. In 1938, Germany stood at the brink of war with Europe. The highly disciplined Hitler Youth were ready to die for their fatherland. They had come a long way from their roots. The Hitler Youth movement was founded 16 years earlier in 1922, when Hitler was still the leader of an extremist fringe party. The first members were a group of boys who were too young to join the party proper. Throughout the 1920s, the Hitler Youth were branded as street brawlers and vandals. It was only as the Nazis struggled for electoral success at the end of the decade that they began to develop into a serious force. The transformation was the work of a young and ambitious Nazi student, Baldur von Schirach.
Wir sind die deutsche Zukunft. Wir sind das Deutschland von morgen.
Von Schirach set about completely restructuring the Hitler Youth. He concentrated on attracting the middle class, as Hitler had done with the party as a whole. Within a year, von Schirach had assembled 70,000 cheering boys at a rally in Potsdam.
That rally was a dream come true for us youngsters. Whereas we normally met in small groups, we assembled there for the first time en masse, and our numbers demonstrated what a political force we had become.
Ein Stück politische Bekenntnismacht. Und meine lieben Jungs, ich glaube an die unbändige Kraft des Nationalsozialismus, die alles vernichtet, was sich ihr entgegenstemmt.
When Hitler came to power on the 30th of January 1933, he promised an end to the unemployment and poverty that had plagued the country. In its place, he would create a proud new Germany. It was a vision that struck a chord with the nation's youth.
I saw all the progress in Germany. People getting work, the flags, processions, torchlit parades. We were excited by it. It was like a mass hypnosis. It put me under its spell.
The highlight of the Nazi calendar was Hitler's birthday. The 20th of April was declared a national holiday. Every year, the Hitler Youth initiated a new crop of 10-year-olds as a gift to the Führer.
Ich war 10 Jahre alt.
When I was a 10-year-old, the papers announced that the German people were giving all 10-year-olds to the Führer. We were actually being given as a present to the Führer.
Boys were sworn into the Hitler Youth in a solemn membership ritual.
The entire troop was assembled on the sports ground. All the platoons lined up in file and publicly swore an oath of allegiance. I remember the words. I promise always to do my duty in the Hitler Youth.
Immer meine Pflicht zu tun.
Meine Pflicht zu tun. In Liebe und Treue zum Führer und unserer Fahne.
The regime was determined to attract the young. Boys couldn't wait to join the Jungvolk, the Hitler Youth Wing for 10 to 14-year-olds.
We boys felt somehow elated. Suddenly, we mattered.
In the initiation ceremonies, thousands of children dedicated their lives to Hitler.
From the local party heads to the junior boys leaders, we were now part of one big community.
The main part of the Hitler Youth was for boys, but there was a separate wing for girls.
We were a new generation, a generation that would one day rule Greater Germany. It made sense to us.
I was looking for comradeship, friendship, and something constructive to do. Most of all, though, I sought recognition, and I found it there.
We felt more at ease in the group with the uniform and the sing-alongs than we did at home with our parents.
They said of anyone who wasn't a member, he's not one of us, he's an outcast. He doesn't fit into the community of the Greater German Reich.
As the Nazis tightened their grip on Germany, the Hitler Youth movement's drive for members gathered pace. They would use any means possible to seduce Germany's youth. German boys were seduced by the Hitler Youth. One tactic was sport. From 1933, the Nazis decreed that young people could only join a sports club if they were already Hitler Youth members. And the movement organized trips to the mountains and the seaside.
Children couldn't go away on holiday. They played on the balcony or in the street. If they were especially lucky, they had a grandma with a small holding in Mecklenburg, but that was it. All of a sudden, they could go away for 2 or 3 weeks holiday. It was new to them. They hadn't travelled before. Vergeisen.
Hitler Youth leaders realized the importance of keeping their young recruits busy. There was a set program of events every weekend.
At the age when I joined the Jungvolk, it was fun. It was fun to be with children of the same age and not just scuffle in the street or climb trees, but go on proper trips.
Bäume zu klettern, sondern Fahrten zu machen.
The highlight of the year was the Hitler Youth Summer Camp.
Da sind wir rausgefahren an so einen kleinen See und haben dort Lager gemacht. Und das war
We rode to a small lake and set up camp. It was wonderful. It was paradise for us. Lighting a campfire, cooking over it, camp life. I think all boys want to do that kind of thing. It was a regimented, warped way of playing cowboys and Indians.
Deformierte Art des Indianer sein wollen.
What mattered to us was the company of other boys, the group experience, the excursions, the physical exertion. We sweated, we froze, we got drenched in our tents. We could swear, we could let off plenty of steam, but in the end, we were a community of boys, and that's what really counted.
Das war sehr wichtig.
The trips taught the boys self-sufficiency through camping and hunting. For most, it was an entirely new experience.
Everyone sat around the fire, and we sang as the night drew in. It was dark, the stars were out. It was awe-inspiring and quite unforgettable.
Das alte nordische Feuerrad ist unser Siegeszeichen geworden.
All those things, the outings, the fire and so on, were copied. The appeal of the young folk was based directly on the atmosphere of the old Youth League.
But there was a more sinister motive to the Hitler Youth activities. This was the start of a military training program. Boys were required to take part in regular tests of strength and endurance. They fought each other in war games.
Das war ja ernst, ne?
We took it seriously. Sometimes we were really hurt. We played rough.
You've no idea how determined we were before we started a field exercise.
Aggression was encouraged.
Even if we got bruised and hit and took a lot of punches, we accepted it. It toughened us up, and that's what we wanted.
At the age of 10, these boys were learning to become ruthless soldiers.
In the
Hitler Youth, they taught us to be tough. It was all part of a plan. What did Hitler say a German boy must be?
Flink wie Windhunde, zäh wie Leder und hart wie Kruppstahl.
Older boys could quickly move up the ranks in the Hitler Youth and become platoon leaders. They were told to show younger recruits no mercy.
I went to my platoon leader and said, "I report that my father has died." As I told him this, I started to cry. The tears flowed. I couldn't talk anymore. My voice failed me. And then this platoon leader addressed me very curtly. It was more like shouting, really. He said, "A German boy doesn't cry." Since that moment, I've never shed another tear.
Was wir uns unter der deutschen Jugend der Zukunft wünschen, ist etwas anderes, als was die Vergangenheit sich gewünscht hat. Wir müssen einen neuen Menschen erziehen.
Bin ich erst mal groß und nicht mehr klein.
When I'm big and out of infancy, a soldier of the Führer I'll be. That was the kind of slogan that captured my attention. I felt like repeating it when my mother said, "That's so childish." I remember thinking, "Mother dear, I haven't been a child for ages. I'll soon be a soldier."
Ich bin bald ein Soldat.
Hitler Youth leaders cleverly tapped into teenagers' naturally rebellious streak. They encouraged boys to distance themselves from their parents.
We used to spend Sundays with our parents. We'd go out on a boat or for a walk or play a game. But all that stopped because we were told, "You can't go everywhere with your parents. You're a mummy's boy." None of us wanted to be a mummy's boy, me included, so we tried to cut the apron strings.
Also musste man sich von den Eltern abnabeln.
Ja, und da kam dann also der Konflikt mit dem Elternhaus.
It caused trouble at home. On Sunday mornings, while my father was preaching, I preferred to attend Hitler Youth meetings. I did drill on the square with the other boys, or march through the village singing songs.
Mit den Jungen exerziert oder bin Lieder singend mit denen durchs Dorf marschiert.
Ahnen Sie eigentlich, was hier vor sich geht? Spüren Sie denn nicht, dass hier etwas besudelt wird, was Ihnen eigentlich heilig sein müsste? Hat unser Volk nicht lang genug unter völkischem Minderwertigkeitsgefühl gelitten?
Propaganda films like this encouraged the cult of youth.
Hört! Was erlauben Sie sich die Durchgabe? Wir sind hier eine geschlossene Gesellschaft. Mit welchem Recht kommen Sie hier herein und protestieren? Ich protestiere mit dem Recht der Jugend.
Die Aufmüpfigkeit, die ist Teil...
Rebelliousness was exploited by the Hitler Youth and used for the purposes of the Third Reich.
Und für die Zwecke des Dritten Reiches.
We rebelled against the rest of the world.
Wir waren aufmüpfig gegen die ganze übrige Welt. Das ganze Dritte Reich war eine Rebellion.
The whole of the Third Reich was a rebellion against the civilized, humane world.
As Hitler increased his stranglehold over Germany through the 1930s, the Hitler Youth became more and more important in boys' lives. The number of meetings and activities expanded to fill their free time and allow them no respite from Nazi thinking.
Das in Sklavenketten liegt, die wir Jungen einst zerbrechen werden. Wir erneuern in dieser Nacht dem Führer und seiner Idee die Treueschwur. Sieg! Heil!
For many boys, loyalty to the Führer replaced loyalty to their families.
Ich habe ja mich dann als Hitlerjunge geschämt. Zu meinem Bedauern muss ich das heute sagen. Aber
I'm sorry to have to admit that when I was a member of the Hitler Youth, I was actually ashamed of my father because he wanted nothing to do with National Socialism.
Nationalsozialismus nichts wissen wollte. Und ich habe mit meinem Bruder in einer Kammer neben der Küche geschlafen.
My brother and I slept in a little room next to the kitchen. One night I heard voices. I heard that it was a Jew and he wanted to cross the border.
Und da hat mein Vater gesagt, er soll da bleiben, bis heute oben bringt er ihn über.
My father said he'd take him over that night. And so he crossed the border with the Jew and came back alone. I wished, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I wished at that very moment that I wasn't the son of such parents.
But in many homes, parents were happy to see their children become diligent Nazi pupils.
Es hat Elternhäuser gegeben, wo...
There were homes where the boys were told, keep your hearts free. It wasn't like that with me. All my classmates' parents supported the Nazis.
Alle Eltern für die Nazis. Niemand hat mich...
No one encouraged me or gave me the nerve to oppose the Nazis. And everything was 100% in those days. I succumbed to the Nazis 100%.
Hundertprozentig. Also ich bin 100%ig dann den Nazis verfallen.
The regime ensured that children repeatedly heard a simple yet seductive message. They were Germany's future.
The concept of youth was idealized.
Ihr seid einmal Deutschlands Zukunft, denn ihr seid einmal Deutschland. Ihr seid einmal unser Volk. Ihr seid einmal nicht die Hoffnung, sondern ihr müsst dann die Vollendung dessen sein, was wir hoffen.
Ihr seid. You are. The young are. Old people have no idea. They're past it. They've had their day. Young people love to hear that kind of thing.
By 1935, the Nazis had charmed 4 million young Germans into joining the Hitler Youth, half the nation's children. It was now time to forcibly recruit the rest. In 1935, a mass rally was organized at Nuremberg by the leader of the Hitler Youth, Baldur von Schirach.
Mein Führer, ich melde Ihnen die größte Jugendkundgebung der Welt. Ich melde Ihnen den freiwillig vollzogenen Eintritt von 917.445 Jugendlichen am 20. April dieses Jahres. Heil Jungen!
Als wir dann diese Mengen sahen, dass wir nicht allein...
When we saw the crowds, and there were thousands and thousands of us, all in the same uniform, we felt elated because they were all like us. I saw boys cry. To me, that was unusual. In uniform, in the middle of the day, they were crying. I went over to one of them because it bothered me that a German boy in our group should be crying. I asked what was wrong, and he said, "It was so lovely. It was so lovely that I'm trembling."
Das ist so schön, Ich zittere.
The rally was an important propaganda tool in the Nazis' policy of Gleichschaltung, the idea that class should be eradicated from German society. For the Nazis, the Hitler Youth was a shining example of Gleichschaltung at work.
Durch die Uniform waren wir praktisch.
The uniform made us all virtually equal, although we came from different social classes. A uniform put the son of a tradesman or a worker on the same level as the son of a professor. We were comrades.
Wir waren Kameraden.
Meine Kameraden, nach Ihrem Befehl, mein Führer, steht hier eine Jugend, die keine Klasse und keine Kaste kennt.
This imposition of uniformity meant the dispossession of the German boy and the destruction of his individuality. This was von Schirach's aim, and he achieved it.
Alle Jugend dem Führer, das ist die Parole der HJ. Und wie in den vergangenen Jahren rufen wir auch heute den Jahrgang der 10-Jährigen zum Dienst unter Adolf Hitlers Fahne.
In 1936, as Germany prepared to host the Berlin Olympics, the Hitler Youth movement launched its most ambitious recruitment drive yet. Boys turning 10 that year were identified from birth certificates, and their parents were then visited by Hitler Youth members. A mixture of charm and threats persuaded 90% of parents to enroll their children. Those who refused to join faced sanctions.
It wasn't what I'd call voluntary. There was no real possibility, at least in normal circumstances, of not joining the Hitler Youth or the Jungvolk. That is, if you didn't want to be a real outsider, even at school.
Vom HJ-Gericht hatte die Schule ein Schreiben gekriegt, dass ich von der
The school got a letter from the Hitler Youth Tribunal saying I should be expelled. I didn't deserve to go to a grammar school because I hadn't joined the Hitler Youth.
Und der Direktor hat dann
The headmaster then suggested to my parents that they might like to take me out of school straight away.
melden möchten, noch am selben Tage vom Gymnasium.
Non-Nazi youth groups continued to meet, but if discovered, they risked trouble from the Hitler Youth security patrols.
We were just having a normal meeting when a Hitler Youth patrol of 20 or 25 boys, all strapping lads, burst in and started to thrash us.
Der Höhepunkt war vielleicht der, dass wir einmal, als wir von
Our worst experience came one Sunday evening when we were returning from an excursion. The Hitler Youth were waiting on the bridge over the Oder. They beat us up and pushed the leader of our small group, 19-year-old Konrad Feicht, off the bridge.
von der Brücke geschmissen.
The Hitler Youth had annexed every other youth movement in Germany.
We thought that now we could determine how society was organized. The other youth organizations were disbanded and incorporated into the Hitler Youth.
Any boys who still refused to sign up felt the consequences.
Nun gingen die stramm dort vorbei, mit der Fahne voran.
They marched briskly past, the flag at the front. Suddenly one of them stepped out of the middle of the column, boxed my ears and said, "Salute the flag." Naturally, I was shocked.
Stand da und war natürlich schockiert. Du darfst nicht abseits stehen.
I thought I'd better not be left out. If I joined, I wouldn't be punched. I'd be one of them and then I might do the punching.
Plötzlich hörte mein Vater Schläge, Trommelschläge.
Suddenly, my father heard the sound of drum beats. I heard them too. They were getting closer. They echoed dreadfully in the narrow street. Then I remembered that my classmates had said, "If you don't join the Jungvolk, we'll come and get you." Is that what was happening?
Sollte das wahr werden?
They came closer, formed a semicircle outside our door. Then the doorbell rang. We were afraid. I went out, and 2 boys came either side of me and led me to the last of the groups, and I had to fall in line. I saw another boy in civvies, and I realized they were rounding up more boys. We started marching, and the marching itself fused us into a single entity. If you control the streets, you control the people.
Der hatte die Menschen.
Every conceivable youth activity was now under Nazi control.
The idea that every Hitler Youth and Jungvolk member could do whatever he was interested in was the great attraction. But you could only do that if you were good enough.
Man durfte zuerst auch nur, wenn man gute Leistungen gebracht hatte.
Boys were forced to compete at everything. They were bullied and humiliated if they didn't fit in.
If you couldn't jump more than 5 meters, you were a loser. You were rejected and ridiculed.
Ausgestoßen und lächerlich gemacht.
Leistung musste man auf irgendeine Weise bringen, jeder auf seine Art.
You had to be good at something. Everybody could be good at something. Develop a positive self-image and feel important.
Gefühl entwickeln und sich bedeutend fühlen.
The Hitler Youth taught boys vocational skills so that one day they could fuel the German war effort. But even in the factories and workshops, a competitive element was introduced.
Wir haben im Reichsberufswettkampf die gesamte junge Generation Deutschlands auf dieses Leistungsprinzip verpflichtet.
You got a certificate to say that you had passed with a certain mark. Naturally, it was an honor.
The toughest and most loyal Hitler Youth members quickly advanced.
We were assessed by our platoon leaders on the basis of points awarded for sport, field exercises and so on, and also for how we behaved, how well we sang and how clearly we spoke when we explained something. All these attributes were noted, and that was how one rose through the ranks.
Jeder lauerte drauf, eine neue Schnur.
Everyone was dying to get a new lanyard or pennant to signify a promotion. The attraction was that every German could rise into a position of command over someone who in their turn commanded someone else. Nearly everybody had a position of some kind, even young people.
Und so war es auch bei den Jugendlichen.
The hierarchy of the Hitler Youth was an important part of its appeal. Boys were seduced by the idea of controlling their peers.
When you stood there and said, halt, eyes left, eyes right, look to the front, and you didn't have to take part, you were the one giving the orders, that made you feel pretty good about yourself.
Das war immer wieder ein Erlebnis, so vor der Front zu stehen.
It was quite an experience to stand there, give orders, and have the feeling you were important without knowing why.
Ohne zu wissen was.
You were elated because you had a position of authority.
Durch diese Autorität gehoben.
Ein 12-Jähriger kann dann schon 10-Jährige.
A 12-year-old could command 10 10-year-olds. Halt, lie down, for they have to throw themselves down. You set your goals higher and higher. As a squad leader, you had 30 boys under you. As a platoon leader, you had 100. You could order them about. That's seductive for boys. The Nazis knew that, and they exploited it. A lot of boys fell for it. I, for one.
Bei vielen damals, wie zum Beispiel bei mir, hat's geklappt.
The boys were ruled with a rod of iron.
When the order to sing was given, we had to sing. If it wasn't loud enough, we'd be scolded. We were totally straitjacketed. There was no freedom at all.
If I gave an order, I would expect it to be carried out. If I said sing, then of course they'd sing. If I gave them marching orders, they marched. It was taken for granted. They did it as unquestioningly in the Hitler Youth as they did it later in the army.
Nichts ist möglich, wenn nicht ein Wille befiehlt, denn immer die anderen zu gehorchen haben. Von oben beginnend und ganz unten erst endend.
Orders were followed blindly. You didn't question them. Orders were orders. It was simple. If you didn't obey, you would be treated accordingly.
Hitler, Junge Hitler, bietet von der weiteren Teilnahme an einem Lehrgang entbunden zu werden. Na nu? Was ist denn mit dir los? Dafür, ich glaube, ich schaffe das nicht, was dir alles verlangt wird. Ich denke, du willst Offizier werden. Und da willst du schon nach 3 Tagen schlapp machen. Ich will dir mal was sagen. Ob du das hier schaffst oder nicht, das bestimmen wir und nicht du. Reiß dich mal gefälligst zusammen. Jawohl, Aufhörer. Wegtreten. Wegrennen.
The individual didn't count. They never asked, can you do that? How do you feel? Do you like that? We had to get on with it, and we did. We had taken the oath.
The Hitler Youth boys were being trained to follow orders for a reason. They had to be prepared to carry out the extremes of Nazism without question. The Hitler Youth operated in clubhouses as well as training camps. Here, youth leaders taught boys about military tactics and lectured in Nazi philosophy.
We learnt about the lives of the Nazi leaders and the anti-Jewish campaign. It was like a school lesson in National Socialism.
Hitler Youth leaders were given carefully selected phrases to read out.
The goal of the Jews is to brutally rule other races. In this, the Jewish people reveals itself in all its madness and its brutal thirst for power.
They were elegant, very elegant indeed, in the way they told us things in small doses. One small dose at a time, and then a tiny bit more. That way we didn't notice what they were doing to us.
When we were marching, we used to bawl out an unbelievably vile song. Hang the Jews, line the fat cats up against the wall. Probably not one of us stopped to think about what those words actually meant.
What the boys learned in meetings was put into practice on the streets.
Then we started marching. We came to the local bank. There was a glass case in which Der Stürmer, the extreme Nazi tabloid, was displayed. Our platoon leader saw the case and roared, "Death to Judah." The cry was taken up by the boys in the front and travelled down the line to me at the back. It was a crisis of conscience. I couldn't join in, I couldn't. I just mouthed the words. But then something clicked. The idea came to me that Judah was a country somewhere far away, and if I said, "Death to a country," I wasn't hurting people. I joined in the shouting. It was terrible.
On the 9th of November 1938, the Nazis launched a major attack on the Jews. It became known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass.
Enthusiastically, I went to see where the fire was burning. It was next to our school. I wondered why they only put out the house fires next door and not the main fire, until a Hitler Youth friend said, "Hey, we lit that. Weren't you there this morning when we smashed the Jews' shop windows and took stuff?" Then I saw stormtroopers and Hitler Youth members carrying out Torah scrolls. They cheered as they threw them onto the fire. 2 days after Kristallnacht, all Ludwigsburg was whispering, "Our doctor, Dr. Pintus, is dead." He was arrested on Kristallnacht in the evening and took cyanide in the prison van because he knew what was coming. I was 13 years old. It struck me for the first time that 3 years earlier I'd shouted death to Judah, and now he was really dead.
Most boys were hardened to the horrors of Kristallnacht. They had learned to trust Hitler completely.
Glaube, der unabdingbare Glaube.
Faith, unconditional faith, that the Führer would do things right.
Ist uns ja damals als der
He was represented in those days as God, well, akin to God.
Gottähnliche.
And that's how we saw him.
Das haben wir auch darin gesehen.
War ein Idol, es war ein halber Gott für uns.
He was our idol. He was a demigod. I tell you quite honestly, if someone had tried to shoot Hitler, I'd have leapt forwards and died for him. Nowadays, I know it was madness.
Und als Wahnsinn, ne?
In 1932, Herbert Norkus, a 15-year-old member of the Hitler Youth, was murdered. He had died after a violent street fight with members of the Communist Party. Hitler Youth leaders immortalized Norkus as the hero of a film. They made sure every member of the movement saw Herbert Norkus martyr himself to the Nazi cause.
Perfekt.
Fahne flattert uns.
Wir haben den bewundert, den Jungen.
We admired him. A shiver used to run down our spines.
Gänsehaut über den Rücken gelaufen.
Und die Fahne für uns in die Ewigkeit. Ja, die Fahne ist mehr als Erfolg.
Du bist eigentlich nichts, dein Leben ist nichts wert, du musst es...
You're nothing? Your life is worthless. You must be ready to sacrifice your life to the flag. It was an appeal to the young that sentenced them to death. Can there be a greater crime than that? It was an appeal made to 12- and 13-year-old boys.
12-, 13-jährige Jungs gerufen.
Früh übt sich, was ein Meister werden will. Es tragen die Jungen als wandelnden Schwamm, die Abend der Offensive.
Hitler Youth boys were invited to visit army barracks, use the firing ranges, and take part in training maneuvers.
Geländespiele haben wir selbstverständlich gemacht, in denen man...
Of course, we did field exercises in which we tried to behave like soldiers. Move forwards properly. Don't let yourselves be seen. Creep up on them and so on. Children love that kind of thing. And they exploited that. But these games were immensely entertaining, and you can seduce people that way.
Man kann ja auch auf das Spielerischste verführen.
By 1936, Germany's army, the Wehrmacht, was playing an increasingly prominent role in the Hitler Youth.
Das war das Ziel des Führers.
The Führer's goal was to train young people as soldiers. Young men the world would fear. That's what he once said. And the world did fear them.
Dieser Jugend ist die Welt ja dann auch erschrocken.
When war finally came, boys who had been trained in specialist camps from the age of 10 finally had a chance to fight. For the Hitler Youth, war was the culmination of everything they had learned.
It unleashed a certain enthusiasm in us. Poland was a surprise to me as a 13-year-old, but I still remember the entry into Paris, the occupation of Paris, and the quick end to the French campaign. That certainly filled us with enthusiasm.
The country was euphoric after Hitler's success against the French in 1940. Teenage boys from the Hitler Youth rushed to volunteer to serve their nation.
We were eager to become real soldiers and go to war properly, although naturally we had no idea how cruel this war would become.
The Hitler Youth had seduced a generation of German boys into believing in the Nazi cause. But in serving Hitler, many of them would be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice.
Hitler's Children continues at the same time next Saturday. Find out more about the exploitation of child soldiers through history at channel4.com/history. They may have become increasingly marginalised, but are they essential to our way of life? The British Upper Class, tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Next tonight, Big Brother.